maybe she'll be with us live, but she always goes back and reviews it. Good morning to the live stream community. I'm glad to welcome you today. We're in the Wednesday morning reading and listening and sharing the words from the Bible. We are at Isaiah, and we are the chapter numbered 62, Isaiah 62. Okay, Debbie, you're going to read.
For Zion's sake I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest, until her vindication shines out like the dawn, and her salvation like a burning torch. The nations shall see your vindication, and all the kings your glory, and you shall be called by a new name, that the mouth of the Lord will give. You shall be a beautiful crown in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of your God. You shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall no more be termed desolate. But you shall be called, my delight is in her, and your land married. For the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married. For as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your builder marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. Upon your walls, O Jerusalem, I have posted sentinels all day and all night. They shall never be silent. You who remind the Lord, take no rest, and give him no rest until he establishes Jerusalem and makes it renowned throughout the earth. The Lord has sworn by his right hand and by his mighty arm, I will not again give your grain to be food for your enemies, and foreigners shall not drink the wine for which you have labored, but those who harvest it shall eat it. And praise the Lord, and those who gather it shall drink it in my holy courts. Go through the gates, prepare the way for the people, build up the highway, clear it of stones, lift up an ensign over the peoples. The Lord has proclaimed to the end of the earth. Say to daughter Zion, look, your Savior comes. His reward is with him, and his recompense before him. They shall be called the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord, and you shall be called sought out, a city not forsaken.
Hi, Elaine. Okay.
Another bridal illusion.
Yeah, another wedding happening in the scripture lessons today. Yes. I guess weddings, bridal processions were big in the culture. It's a very big deal. You know.
It still is in Uganda.
Is it really? Like big multi-day festivals?
Well, there are two. One is the traditional thing they call introduction. Mud at the wife's home, the bride's home. And that's very, very traditional. And usually a few days later, but sometimes they can't afford to do that. They have more of a like church wedding.
Really? And do they do a reception that follows it?
It's a religious reception in 2002.
Well, how many?
The whole community comes out, right?
Well, if you put all of our kids,
Right.
and then
All their families.
his friends, 2,000.
2,000.
Do people bring? Is it like a potluck?
No.
You have to provide, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they wait
Wow.
to get married because it's so expensive.
Yeah. Do they have
Wow.
dowry too?
I thought weddings were expensive here with 100 people.
Yeah, but relatively it's a lot less, because
Right.
Yeah, but I bet to them.
the preparing is amazing, yeah.
Yeah. Do they have a bride price or a dowry?
Oh, yeah.
Also? Yeah, see, they do all throughout the Middle East too, and these things are a big deal. Yeah,
I know in India the weddings are
humongous.
a week long.
Yeah. You
People,
a
people
henna
come-
party and, oh, yeah.
People come in and they build tents for where they're gonna stay, to be in the area.
It's a reflection on your family if you don't have a big do, I mean, people don't get married because they're afraid to offend
Exactly.
their family
No,
members,
that
because if they
happens.
can't afford it, it makes you look bad in the
Yep.
community.
So they live together without being married, that's not as bad.
Well,
Really, I don't get it.
depends on what part of the world you're in. Yeah, yeah.
Wait, do they do that there?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, they do?
oh, yeah.
They don't tend to do that in the Middle East, but, Yeah.
They have kids, the kids
Yeah.
come to the wedding, it's.
Yeah.
Hey, well, they do that here in the United States too, a lot. Yeah.
Well, and I still think, I actually promised myself I'm gonna go research this at some point, but in the first century, Jesus' time, there was betrothal. And betrothal was a very, it was a very serious commitment, and there was a lot that they would do. Couples would live together when they were betrothed, and it was like a promise, but the wedding hadn't happened yet. And so,
Well, and they didn't have weddings the way we have weddings, did they?
I don't know, I don't think so, not the way we do, no. Although there's so much in the New Testament about the ritual of the bride is in her home, which is more than a house. It's in the whole
The village.
Compound.
gated village, the compound of the bride, and the bride's maids
Common.
are to be watchers, and they are watched because the groom comes to that compound, and then the bridesmaids run out to meet the groom and escort him in. I guess they don't want him to get lost at the last minute.
That sounds very much like the introduction part. of-
That sounds like, yeah,
And after you're introduced, you're considered married,
yeah,
basically.
but you just haven't had your ceremony yet.
In Islam, you do something called the nikah, which is the contract part, the contract phase.
Yeah.
And you have it witnessed Islamically, and essentially then you're married, and you can do what you want. Most people put off the actual consummation until they have some sort of celebration, but you're married when you make the nikah. So, I don't know. But these traditions all have a lot of similarities. And,
Ours less so.
well,
Yeah, we've lost a lot, well,
We
we've
have.
lost so much of what tradition is.
depending on who you are, because the Amish still have some strange things that they do,
Oh, yeah.
and they're taken from, Europe, I mean, when they were there, so. But, yeah, I think you're right. In the 20th century, we started getting away from,
Well,
I
'cause-
would say until the mid-century, because then,
Yeah.
You really didn't
The 50s.
set up household before you were married. That was like
Right.
really not done. But now, people think you're nuts if you do get married before you ever cohabited. Yeah,
Well, nowadays you have to own a car, you have to own a house.
Isn't it true?
You can.
have to have your
you can-
kids
you can
already in
have your
college.
kids already done before you get married.
Exactly.
I mean, but I think some of it is the mobility of our cultures.
Absolutely.
We move around and there isn't the stability of a village. And I don't know, for better or for worse, it's just not how we are.
Yeah. The wonderful thing about the United States is, though, there are a lot of different cultures here. And so just because the majority of people might do it this way, you can still see lots of different variations on marriage.
Yes.
And, I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. I mean, I've been asked to do several weddings that combine Christian and Jewish traditions together, and I try to really be sensitive. It's easier if there's a rabbi there with me, but, if not, I try to learn everything I can about what is the tradition like. And there are things I really like in other traditions, like in the Jewish wedding, the processional down the aisle at the ceremony, the mother and father bring the groom. They escort the groom down to the front, and they stand him there, and they have a little talk with him, and then they're seated. Then the mother and father of the bride come down, and I don't know, there's just more of the, family systems really would celebrate the fact that we're way beyond this sort of patriarchal, commercial deal of who's giving this
Giving the
bride
bride
and
away.
where's the dowry, like.
Right.
But my parents went
It
to,
seems-
go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, it seems to me that the European countries do not have the communal feel that Asia or Middle East or Africa, where people live more in a commune kind of, the large family lives together, it seems, in other places. But, us, and I think what Debbie said in terms of the 50s was true, that, when I was growing up, I could walk pretty much to both my grandmothers, to several of my aunts and cousins and uncles, and now everyone's scattered all over the country, but it's still not that family feel that they still have in other cultures.
My parents
Is that-
I got invited to attend an Amish wedding because they had Amish neighbors and they were very friendly. And they talked a lot about the shocking, different details. Like in the wedding feast, the women and the men make the feast. They work together for it. The men have their jobs and the women, but the whole community, the whole village is gathered for this. And then when it comes time to eat, the men eat first. So the men sit down and the women serve them. But the men eat at 100 miles an hour. They just devour the food. And the reason they do is because they're trying to get done so that then they get up and then the women come in and the women sit down and the men serve the women. And so it's considered polite to not keep the hungry women waiting.
Oh, well, that's
And,
nice.
it's just really
After they
very
cooked it.
interesting, and the men
Yeah.
serve, and then the men clean everything up.
Well, well, okay, there's a deal.
Isn't that amazing?
There's a deal.
Like, I don't know, I think it's like the big deception before marriage, You're trying to,
Yeah, right.
trying to convince the bride that it's gonna somehow be egalitarian, there'll be equalness. But
And if there's something wrong with the food,
Yeah.
the men are gonna get sick first and you know not to eat that.
that's right, that would
Just
be
another
even better, like the food tasters.
Exactly.
But certainly weddings,
Yeah.
the wedding is, on every page of the scriptures, you see this event in human life of, it's sort of a reenactment in a way of the liturgy in Genesis, that two become one, and from the two comes one. And I had a theology professor who said that in some ways the ancient poetry of weddings and sexual intercourse anticipated the arrival of the computer and the zeros and the ones that are the language of the computer. The two become one, and you never move beyond like one, and then two, and then zero, and then back. And that in the rhythm of the universe is this two which are separate become one, then to produce one, and then that one goes off and then finds another one, and those one become two. Isn't that amazing, really?
I think even Plato contemplated that with, I forget, was it in Symposium? Where he said, the human being is incomplete. It needs the other to complete it. So that originally, I forget exactly how he put it. Anyway, it was the same
Yeah,
concept. You're not complete until you have,
right, there's the,
joined with another human being to, yeah. And in Islam, it's like marriage is half the religion. That's what it is. Everybody's encouraged to get married. There's no priests that don't get married. Everyone's encouraged to get married, and you do if you can. There's certain things, if you're crazy, you probably shouldn't get married. There's things that they say that, maybe you should avoid. But otherwise, the whole idea of family and furthering humanity is, and all the things that you learn how to treat other people. The testing ground is marriage. It's, if you can't figure out how to treat your spouse right, how are you going to deal with other people? And really, that's a good thing. I mean, it's a tough thing to master, how to be fair, how to be loving, how to be kind with a spouse. Kind of prepares you for the rest of the world, and how you deal with business and, all the other stuff of life. So that's why it's considered half of, the religion.
Well, there's the central role, here, so the historical background of this text is the people of Israel they've been abused, and they have lost everything. They've been through the darkest of the nights. Their cities have been torn down. Their culture has been decimated. They are now in a period of reconstruction, which they believe God is the author of, and that God now is making superlative promises.
Yes.
Superlative promises about, how it's going to go. But the central metaphor of that whole action is a marriage.
It's a contract.
Yeah, it's you're going to be the bride adorned, and you'll be vindicated, and you will be picked up out of the mud and set up again, all cleaned up, And then God will come and not just join with you, but that God will now protect you. And that this central metaphor, which is drawn right out of their lives, right out of events that happen in their lives. But I don't know, sometimes it leaves me a little flat. The New Testament talks about the church, the communities of the church is a bride, and that God is the bridegroom who comes to gather the church up and see to it that all the lives of people of faith are set on their feet and everything becomes really good. I don't know. It's funny.
Doesn't work, huh?
I don't know. It doesn't. Maybe it's because I'm from a culture that marriage and weddings happen, but I don't know. In our culture, getting married is not anymore the biggest event of your life. I mean, I shouldn't say that for everybody. It is for some.
Yeah. I think it's mostly the actual, I'm going to say this, I don't know if it's true, but it seems to me, as an older person looking at what's happening now, that the marriage itself and the commitments and the promises you make are secondary to the giant party. And then people wake up the day after and say, that was a really big bill for a one-day thing, and now you got this person that maybe you haven't really taken seriously. I mean, we do too much towards,
The show.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's all show business, and Americans are really good at show business, but.
Well, I used to say to couples that would come, I used to do a lot of weddings. Oh my goodness. When you're in a church that has a center aisle, and it's
Nice looking church.
beautiful church, you do weddings. And I used to do 2 weddings a month, which was a lot because I used to require 6 sessions of premarital counseling before I would do the wedding. So that meant 12 nights a week, 12 nights a month. I was sitting and talking with couples about, and I would say this to them, but they would come in and I would say, look, the part you're doing with me is the part you're doing to prepare for your marriage. But the real energy, the real interest that they had, especially often the bride, sometimes the bridegroom, was in the wedding.
The wedding,
Right.
the event.
The dresses, the
the wedding.
flowers, the
Yeah.
food,
And my,
How many bridesmaids can I have?
yes, oh my goodness. And now it's 12 on each side.
I know.
It's like,
That's a lot of people to please with the dress that will fit everyone. You're really making your life miserable for
Yeah,
that.
and a dress that'll never be able to be worn anywhere after.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
My favorite story from that period of time was I had a couple that came to me to get married and did premarital counseling. And I don't know, I could just say the highest number I can imagine they spent on this wedding. I remember going into the restroom at the venue and thinking that the flowers in the restroom,
In the men's room.
in the men's room, in the
In the
men's
men's
room,
room.
in the men's room, I was certain that the flowers in the men's room must have cost $500 to $600. I mean, it was
ridiculous.
insane. Just the expense that was rolled out in every way they could imagine. And they got married and everything. Okay, great, everybody's good. 1 week. 1 week. Bride called me up on the know if she could meet with me.
Get out of this.
And I said, I thought you were on your honeymoon.
No.
She goes, oh, we postponed that because they wanted to do something bigger. But she wanted to know if she could meet with me. And she came in and she sat down and wanted to know if I could effect an annulment of the marriage.
That bad, huh?
And I said, what? I said, we spent 6 2.5-hour sessions talking. What are you talking about? This is what she said to me. She said, I just don't understand why you didn't stop me.
Oh, come on, it's your fault.
I said, what are you talking about?
Maybe she's a little immature.
She said,
What do you think?
couldn't you tell that I was saying to you every session, I don't want to get married, I don't want to do this? And I said, what? How were you saying it? Was I supposed to read your mind? And she said, well, I kind of thought that you would figure it out. And I said, you mean like when I looked at you and said, do you really want to get married? And you said, yes? You know, right then? Was that when the clue was?
You're getting the blame. It's your
Oh
problem.
my gosh,
How silly.
and I had to say, I have no power to annul your wedding. I said, you can go down to the county courthouse and see if they filed it yet and maybe pull it back, but my part's done. My part's done.
Exactly.
Like, you know.
That's crazy.
But they got separate. That was it.
Really?
Yep.
They didn't. Oh.
I think her father must have spent $200,000 on the
God.
wedding.
You know, and as parents, we always start out, I don't know about anybody else, but like, well, you know, we could do this, you know, not too expensively,
Right.
and I'd gladly give you the money I would have spent so you can put it
Yes.
towards.
Yeah.
And nobody takes that.
Well, and these little
you know.
things start,
And you feel like, okay, I love my kid, I'm gonna do what I can, and why not? And you get caught up in this jazz too, and afterwards you think, why?
was that limo really that important?
Exactly. So we're in, you know, American culture has us, they've got us. Yeah. Oh, anyway.
Well,
So
the-
brainwashed.
But at least, you know, my kids, I think, realized, you know, who they were marrying. My older daughter had some misgivings, and I said, just don't do it. Why? I don't want to hurt his feelings. I said, that's not a good reason. Sure enough, 4 years later, there was a divorce there, and unfortunately. And the second time around, she paid for her own wedding. It was much more subdued. And it's been a wonderful match. I don't know. But everybody's different. You know, what can you do?
Yeah, and I know that, I mean, from my own experience, one of the reasons I did the premarital counseling was because in my first marriage, I got caught up in the process of my family thinking I should be married by now. You know, you should,
Pressure.
you know, what's going on with you? And so I went through with getting married at a full conscious awareness that I did not want to be doing this.
Ooh, that's not good.
But and unfortunately, again, because of the cloister of my family, my father was the pastor, so my father did the premarital counseling.
Oh, gee.
And it was ridiculous. It was, you know,
You should recuse yourself
yeah.
if it's your family.
No, not in my family. It's everything is done in the family. It's a private religion. But, you know, and I look back, and so what I did was, I thought, you know what? I did this, I got married, and I'm going to carry out my vows. I'm going to be faithful. But nothing ever really prepared me for how unhappy I was,
Aw.
you know.
Yeah, I know the feeling. My daughter was on the West Coast, and we were all the way over here on the East Coast. And I have a feeling that if we had been at least in close proximity, but, you know, and you're a mature human being. You know, you've always known, you know, what's best for you. So, okay. And sure enough, she was right in having misgivings. And but as a parent, how much can you do?
You can't.
Yeah, I didn't want to do what your family did and pressure
Yeah.
the opposite way, like get out of it. And then it might have been, so you don't know, you know.
Exactly. Well, I didn't say what I should have said to my daughter. I
Oh.
should have said, it's okay, you don't have, you know, I don't care that you've been living together, you don't have to go through with this. I should have said that to her, and I didn't. And later I told her, she said, it wouldn't have mattered, Mom.
There
She
you
said
go,
it
you're
wouldn't have mattered.
exonerated.
Yeah, it wouldn't have mattered.
You're exonerated. And
She was very sweet about it.
Yeah, well, that's nice.
that's
She let you
probably
off the
true.
hook.
Yeah, exactly. That's,
But I'm quite sure that that entered into it, you know, that she didn't want to let me down.
I had a,
And she kept thinking it was going to get better.
well, that's what they did. That's why
Well,
my
that's it,
daughter's
you know.
first marriage lasted 4 years. She said, I didn't want to hurt his feelings, I didn't want to hurt your, I said, what had we, no. Now you're going to say, oh, by the way, like out of the blue, you know. She said, well, I've been thinking about it for a while. Like, she is too closed-mouthed. She always has
Well,
been.
Martha wasn't,
But that's her.
yeah, well,
The
But
other
she's
one's
happy
just
now.
the opposite.
Uh-huh.
She's very happy now. Thank you, God.
but it's complicated. It's very complicated as a, you know, in some ways, the centrality of marriage and the finding of the partner and, you know, faithfulness. How the word faithfulness to a covenant in here is like, it's what it's all about. And that became the foundational structure of how to understand God. God is a God who makes promises
and keeps them.
and keeps them, and then asks us in return to make promises and keep them. So that sounds like a wedding. I mean, doesn't that sound like a wedding? You know, I think that
It should.
I think the variation, which I learned in the studying of the Greek or of the Hebrew, was that there were particular kinds of promises. And the marriage promise was a suzerainty promise. And that is very similar to the promise that God made. So in the suzerainty covenant, both parties would promise to do their part. But if one party did not, the covenant was released. The other partner is released. And that is what the writers in Scripture refer to all the time when God comes to humanity and says, hey, I'm keeping my side of the covenant, but you're not, so I'm released. I'm released. I am bound by nothing anymore. And then you have this, you know, this sort of animation of God, the humanization of God, as God rethinks it and then comes back and says, oh, all right.
I'll give you another chance.
But in early American period, and I think out of the European tradition, the idea was the marriage covenant is inviolate.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that you can do. You're married, that's the end of the story. That was never the biblical model of marriage,
Unless
ever.
the Pope gives you permission.
Well, yeah, and, you know, you gotta have enough money to make that happen.
Exactly.
But the idea was, it's a cooperative promise, so that, you know, I would use this, especially when I worked in the battered women's shelter, to try to say to women, this behavior of this person towards you is not the fulfillment of their marriage covenant. You are released. You're released, but they were not released in their head. Not at all. And they were not they were not going to do anything to, cause the end of their marriage, which I just thought was so screwed up. Never said that to them.
Good, good.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
It's very hard to understand.
Yeah. I mean,
It is.
in modern Orthodox Jewish religion now, the marriage is dissolvable by the husband, but the wife has to get a get. She has to go to the Jewish authorities, the rabbis, and make her case, and she can be turned down. So it seems lopsided. It doesn't seem like it's the original contract that maybe God had in mind. I mean, it's still lopsided on the side of the men. And in Islam too, people who adhere to more strict guidelines seem to want to say the male has the prerogative, the female has to go through hoops to do the same thing. So, and it's not always the case. It's, there's debate, because in the time of the prophet, there were people who got divorced, and he said, okay, if you've come together, if your families have talked about it, you've talked about it, and you're not happy, okay. Wasn't happy, it wasn't, the ideal, but it was allowed.
Right.
And it seemed to be less, male-centered than it can be. But that's, cultural stuff seeps in over time.
Being property, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Europe, you were property of your father until you were property of your husband.
And in Jesus' time, the first century culture of marriage among the religious people was abominable, because the men would be married, and they would go through all that big ritual of marriage. They would have the endowment. But if a man changed his mind, he could divorce a woman on the sidewalk. All he needed was someone to witness it. And all he had to do was to walk up to his wife and say, we're divorced now.
Yep.
And that there was no option for her. And then she was deprived of the ability to own property.
Mm-hmm.
She could not vote. She had no standing. And so she then was delivered to the streets. And this is what appalled Jesus. This is what Jesus is walking and seeing a community of women and their children who had been
Abandoned.
properly, and then, because the males would say, oh, I did follow the letter of the law. I am keeping the law. And Jesus says,
That's not right.
you have bent the law. You have taken the law and bent it to your own bizarre and selfish purposes. And so that's where Jesus comes out and says, look, any man that does that is committing adultery.
Exactly.
If you see a woman that you desire across the street and you're walking with your wife and you go, sorry.
She looks better.
Yeah, sorry, and go across the street, because then he was considered free
Right.
to go engage in another relationship.
But she's not, and that, in the Middle East, that does persist. It is a bit easier for men to divorce their wives, but now there's all these safeguards that the religion put against it. One of them is you are still responsible for your former wife, and you are responsible for any offspring that came of that marriage, which kind of, is like what we have here. You have to pay alimony, you have
Right.
to, and you have to wait 3 months, because the woman has to wait 3 months, because you have to make sure that there was nothing, in her womb from your marriage,
Oh.
So there's a lot of things that came about to protect the women, because I think it was very much the same as the Judaic, it's the same area, same cultures. Yeah, but at least, they came a bit of the way. I still think, if you can have 4 wives, I don't know,
Yeah.
somebody's getting,
Wait, what? Say that.
in
If
Islam,
you
you're
can
allowed to
oh,
have
you
4
are?
wives.
You are?
Yes, you are allowed 4 only. but the idea is you must treat them all equally. Who
And-
can
and
do
I'll
that?
tell you in Lucaya, they don't.
They don't, and you know what?
Really?
Nobody can. I don't think anybody can. You're talking about different people, personalities, wants, needs. Who can do that? So mostly here, especially here, you don't see multiple,
Well,
wives.
it is against the law here.
It is, but
But-
people, I have known a couple of,
Yeah.
households where it, but, it's like, what is it, the Mormons?
Yeah, the
Did they have
Mormons.
that for a long time before it was out? But, if you're told you must treat the wives exactly, equally, who can do that? And who has the dough to do that?
Right.
That means you gotta set up another house for her, and
And who can enforce it?
Well,
Yeah,
this is true.
exactly.
Who can enforce that? Like,
So marriage keeps changing with times, with cultures, with, but I do like the poetic language of marriage and the religion and the idea of, I don't know if it's workable, it's just lovely poetically. At least it's not, take revenge and slice people's heads off. At least the language in this chapter is nice. Marriage.
it's pretty.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he loves us.
I love you, you love me. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? Yeah, but do we stick to those, agreements that we make? Well, we don't.
When I started doing these, this read-through of the Bible, I felt like it was important to emphasize that no matter how you understand it, the biblical view of God is that God is a God of relationships. It's all about relationships. And then I loved a period of my life where my theology was married to my science, because now these process theologians are talking about how around us, whether we see it or not, everything is relationships. Everything. The reason the chair holds me up when I sit down on it is because of the established relationships between the microparticles and everything is cooperating to create everything that is. And then in the world of relationships, and especially in biology, your area, you see this incredibly, almost invisible if you don't look, cooperation, the relationship that takes place in all of nature, in everywhere. I mean,
It's just that with very small systems, microscopic and even chemical, and then you keep going after bigger and bigger systems.
right. And
Each-
every larger, in process theory, they call them macro systems. But in every macro system, which then is called to relate to other macro systems, there are micro systems on which the macro systems depend. Everything is relationships. Everything. And they even talk about, it's weird, they almost personify atoms and molecules because they talk about cooperation. There's enormous cooperation that takes place to make the world the way it is. Last year, Laura showed me an article that talked about the fact that they believe that trees underground
Have
communicate
this
with each other.
network, yep, the root
Like,
systems, yep.
What? You
That's
know,
cool, isn't
And we
it?
see these independent structures, that stand, but that and I think one of the examples was that in some areas where there is water and no water, that the larger trees actually can funnel water to the trees that are in the drier areas. It blows my mind.
It's pretty cool, I think.
So
It's
you have this
yeah.
cooperation universe, right? And in the middle of the cooperation universe is this creature called the human.
Yeah, well,
And the
God
human,
was warned.
the
Why are you
human,
gonna make those troublemakers there?
the human seems to have an enormous inability to be in relationship and to cooperate and to,
Yeah.
do the thing that we're created to do.
Well,
meanwhile, our own.
That's free will.
Yeah, that is free will.
Yep.
It's-
That's that story that I keep saying. The angels said to God,
Right.
why are you gonna make this creature? You know this is gonna be a mistake ahead of time. And God said, I know what you don't. So, there you go. That was the answer to the angels. And here we are, making problems for ourselves and the universe, but here we are. And it's more exciting. I think so.
Well, and
because-
that's it, because
Yeah.
what is it that's so exciting about these relationships, that God, not to over-anthropomorphize God, but that God loves adventure, God loves creativity, and loves to see
Apparently.
it happen, loves to see,
Yeah.
just to say, wonder what will happen now. And
God
then-
created the angels have to do. They're just built to worship. That's it. They don't talk back, only one, and he paid for it, right, Lucifer? Yeah. But, a chair is designed to be a chair. The rocks are designed to be rocks, But we have this ability to upset the apple cart if we so choose. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think God said, it's pretty boring without, if I know, everything in my relationship to everything. How about something where I don't know what the relationship will maybe turn out
I
to
think
be?
that's the key, is the understanding of God as willing to entertain, I don't know.
Or at least we don't know.
Yeah, I know, but I think that's still just,
Yeah.
and the other thing is, it's sort of, so here I am, right, trying to decide whether I'm gonna walk in the way of God wants me to walk. Meanwhile, in my body, the systems in my body are all cooperating famously to create who I am, including the synapses of my brain. It's all cooperation, and you see what happens when the cooperation breaks down. You end up in the hospital while they try to get you back in line, get you back so that your systems of your body are cooperating. But in this creature, the ancients said, they described it as created a little bit between the divine and the created, and that we are mingled together in that way. We are.
We have the breath of God in us, so
Right.
that part is divine. And the rest of it
Yeah,
is
and-
clay, right,
and-
or whatever.
And I know in the classical way of talk about free will, but I prefer instead to think of it as a ruha. It actually is the spirit of God. It's the spirit of the Creator. And what is the spirit of the Creator? The Creator creates. The Creator says, I have an idea. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. And the problem arises when the breath of God, the ruah of God, is combined with the flesh, the sark of God, of creation, the earth. God drew up the earth and created this thing, which is both freedom and determination in one. But I don't know.
Yeah.
And so here you come back over and over and over again, that when the writers are trying to describe the indescribable, as I used to say to my children, human beings are touch and see creatures. And the one thing we can neither touch or see is God. So there's the dilemma.
evidence of him, yes.
That's right. It's the dilemma. It's what we live with.
Yeah.
And so here is a way in which I guess people go to weddings, they see these phenomenal events taking place, and then they go, well, that feels like God. That feels like God present on the earth. And so it becomes a worthy metaphor for how God combines with us. Somebody's calling me from Franklin, New Jersey. So, now I lost my train of thought.
It's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah. It's a lovely one.
Yeah. But my worry in this particular one is this idea that this one city and that this one people, I get it, their suffering has been brutal in their history, they're not the only nation or people that have suffered. I mean, my goodness. But somehow, in their understanding, now God is going to rebuild everything that was good, and the wedding is coming back together, and it's going to happen, and they're going to go off happily ever after into the future.
And what about the neighbors?
Yeah, well, let's not even think about that.
Well, it's missing in here.
Yeah.
It is missing because we've read from these other Isaiah writers, we have read the writers who can carry the full vision of, I'm going to reestablish you so that you can then be the light and that you can then be the ministers of grace and justice in the world. That's why I'm rebuilding you with a purpose. The bent of this one is, I'm rebuilding you to defend you.
And to take care of you.
Yes, and to bring justice, which
Yeah.
is payback.
Like you've suffered, but now I'm going to reward you for your suffering. As if a marriage is always lightness and wonderfulness, and if you're using the metaphor of a marriage, you got to include the days the marriage stinks, you know? So what makes these people think? I mean, it's just the writer's license, but
and their
still.
idea is that, they've suffered enough. The bride has suffered so much
God,
that when she's finally back in the big house, and she's finally, got the servants back, that she will never again disobey the way she has disobeyed before.
sure. And then the very next day, come on, we're human. Yeah. So these promises, Judy's not here, so let me make the political analogy. These guys make promises that they know that can't be kept. And so how gullible is the audience? This is the thing, And do you accept lies that you know are lies and still, sometimes you have to. You have to forgive them and say, you're like Isaiah. You're giving too wonderful a picture, although Trump is doing just the opposite. I don't know what his thing is. Did you hear that? I couldn't get away from it because it was on every channel the other night, and I was trying to find, I think I went to MeTV and they had Hogan's Heroes on, and I can't stand that show, so I was back to Trump. And you would think we lived in the worst, like Myanmar or something. In the way he's describing this country, it sounded like what in the heck is, we have eyes, we can see you're lying, we know that, and yet people are okay to go, this is what's happening with the people that Isaiah is speaking to? Is he expecting them to not see reality? That, okay, from now on, the rest of your life is going to be wonderful because what? What makes you think you're any more special than anybody else around you?
Oh, they are special.
Well, if
I said that many times.
Yeah, who are you
you
thinking
are the
about?
chosen, yeah.
Who are you thinking is special? Are you talking about the people here?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is, it's so.
I wonder if the hoi polloi, though, really believe that. Did your average person really think, it's special? Because maybe they did, I don't know. Yeah, you think?
I think Christians do too.
I look at the little ones.
I think it's human to everybody to think that you have the answer for everything and you're the best.
But they
But-
so frequently in the scriptures,
Yeah.
they're the chosen ones,
I guess then, you
And
can't.
they lose the thread. That's the thing is, I don't mind chosen because chosen has in it the word mission. As long as chosen isn't the beginning and the end of the sentence.
Good point.
Because the sentence that the word chosen belongs in is, you are chosen to be my ambassadors in the world, and you will carry out my mission. You will, God has a mission in the world, and God does not have hands or feet. This came out of South American theology, and the liberation theology was the missio Dei.
Yeah.
That the mission, what is the mission of God? And I remember sitting in seminary and going, mission of God? what is the mission of God? I mean,
You never heard that before?
no,
huh?
I'd never heard that before until, I had a Costa Rican theologian who was my theology professor. And yet the man was full of the fullness, of the fire and the passion of God's love for him. But all of that awareness of God's love for him was immediately channeled into his phenomenal work in the world to bear witness that God loves the world. That God, he would travel through South and Central America, and he would hold these theology seminars, and he would shame us North American boys and say, I go down to Central America, we hold a theology seminar, and people will walk. They will walk 4 hours to come to the theology seminar to hear about this God of mission, the God whose heart breaks when the mission of love is not carried out and when the care and feeding of the poor is not exercised. And then they would sit there for 2 hours in a theology classes, and then they would leave and go to work.
And the Catholic Church really didn't like that kind of preaching in South America at all.
They didn't like the Catholic priests that preached
Right,
it.
they eliminated some of them, not just by excommunication, but some were actually assassinated. And even here in the United States, I forget what it was about, but wasn't there a group of nuns, maybe Barbara remembers, recently, within the last 10 years or so, that their mission was get on the bus?
Yes, yes.
And the Catholic Church said, no, you sisters are overstepping your bounds. You're doing too much for the poor. That's not our mission. What? Yeah. And they said, oh, yeah?
Yeah, we're doing
Yes,
it
it
anyway.
is. Yeah,
Right.
they got on the bus. But,
It's America.
you know,
after all.
there's, exactly. There's always been this tension between the authority of, the religious institutions and what the people who are able to read the scriptures and understand what you're being called to do. There's that tension. Like,
Yeah,
if
and
you're
the-
running an organization, you can't give everything away to the poor. Let's face it. You won't have any money for, buildings or pomp and circumstance or.
Yeah, I hear you, but boy, the scales are
Way
tilted
off.
heavy
Yeah.
toward, the administration and the insurance of the survival of the institution. And long, long forgotten was what the institutions are called to be and to do.
Right.
I mean, it's just, I know you're struggling in trying to bring back the awareness of a call and a mission that you and your husband had in a vision that you saw, and then come back to structured America and try to talk to Presbyterians about this, and they look at you like you have 3 heads. Like, what are you
Oh, they're not
talking
as
about?
bad as some
Yeah.
other groups.
Right. Like, what are
Wow.
you talking about? Like, what? You have to be in the right channels and in the right places and through all the right structures, and I just,
And don't you have an endowment fund? And that has to keep growing and, yeah. It gets to be, and it just naturally happens because we're human. But you're right. I mean, what is the mission? Really?
Orlando Costas he was fiery. He was really fiery, and he had no patience for us.
Oh.
He had no patience for us. He was a man of love, but boy, he could not stand it when he would teach his missiology classes, and these evangelical white Baptists would raise their hands and try to call him on the carpet. So he began every class and made us sing this song. And it was a song from Central America. It was called "Sent by the Lord Am I." I can still hear him singing it. "Sent by the Lord am I.
Oh, it's in English.
My hands are ready now." He translated it. And then he would sing it in Spanish, but it's "Sent by the Lord am I. My hands are ready now to help construct a just and peaceful, loving world. The angels will not go." We're called to do what the angels cannot do. And so when I went on the mission trips, of course, with my little groups on the mission, that was the first song we taught and the song we sang every day. And boy, did it have so much meaning in the context of I'm sent. So if you want to talk about chosen, turn the word chosen into sent.
Sure.
You're sent. You have a mission. And is it special? Yeah. It's a special mission. But you are not a special person. You're not.
You're chosen to serve.
You're chosen
You're not
to serve.
chosen to be the king or the bridegroom.
No. Or if you are,
Wonderful
if you are the king, let's say you do end up to
Right.
be the king.
Yeah.
No, that's even bigger.
Your
Oh, yeah.
responsibility
I mean,
is
you know,
even
now
bigger.
you as the king,
Have a bigger responsibility.
you are chosen by God to be the king, which means through you, all the families of the kingdom must know the blessing of God.
Yeah.
And the courts must be fair, and you know, this is the mission. That's the mission. What did you say?
So far away.
Yeah, so far away, so far away. There was a song, who sang it? Was it Joni Mitchell? You're So Vain.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, that was,
You probably think this song is about you.
yeah,
And, yes,
Who was it?
I can't think of it.
I'll check.
She was
It's
married
not,
to James
my-
Miller.
Yeah.
Can't think of her
We
name.
know it. We all know.
Carol King? No?
Was it Carol King?
No.
No, it wasn't
No.
Carole King. Okay, let me, okay,
And I,
I
talk
think
among
it's
yourselves.
just
but I think about that song, like, I think that's you know, that's the song to the
Sorry,
first-
it's Carly Simon.
Carly
There
Simon.
we go.
I couldn't think of it.
That's the song to the first world. You know,
Oh,
the
yeah.
first
We are
world.
so vain.
You're so vain.
Yeah, yeah.
You think the song of this creation is about you.
Of course it is, isn't it? Come on.
Sorry.
We are the USA.
Yes, it's like,
The hubris is just amazing.
and
We all share it as Americans. How many times have you thought, if only these other countries could operate more like we do? I mean, it's there in every, you know, and it kind of makes it harder to do that mission when you think
You're
you
so
have
right.
all the answers. Exactly.
and Princeton Seminary, during the time when I was in seminary, I wasn't in Princeton, and I'm glad I didn't go there. Princeton Seminary fired all of their professors and theologians who subscribed to liberation theology. They got rid of them all. Every one of them. And even down to the versions that emerged in the United States of women's liberation theology, which was borrowed from the Missio Dei of Central and South America. And they called it womanist theology, and they got rid of them. They fired them. And still to this day, they guard against liberation theology. You know, the whole idea that is the incarnation of God's action in the world like that is heresy. It's heresy. And so theologians, black theologians in particular, like, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. was affected by liberation theology,
Of course.
which was, it was creeping up from Central and South America. It was infecting and moving in, and that's exactly how Princeton Seminary saw it. It was a new heresy, the most recent heresy, because the liberation of God and the salvation of God is not about liberation movements in the world. It is not. It's salvation.
That only
It
came
must
from
remain
That only came from
spiritualized.
Jesus, that idea. That idea came from Jesus. We shouldn't have to listen to him. What does he know about running a church or a synagogue or
Well,
a mosque?
your
I mean,
Jesus
come on.
doesn't know our Jesus. But, you know, and this is why I feel like I benefited so much from the structure of the Presbyterian Church or the Reformed Church. But quite frankly, when I look at the institution and you pay attention, at my age, I look back and I go, what have we been doing?
Right.
Except propping up our own sense of entitlement and our own sense of calledness. Okay.
Well, it's like when Jesus showed up at the temple. You know, you would think they would be simpatico, you know, the temple priests and the rabbis, And he's calling them out, like, what are you doing? You're not doing what God calls you to do. They're running a bureaucracy, and that doesn't change.
No.
It doesn't change through the
It's
years.
supposed to be making a way. Instead, they built obstacles.
Yeah.
They put obstacles up. They created obstacles, and we still do.
You're allowed to go this far inside that gate, and then because you're not who we think you should be to be chosen, you can't go that one step further. And if you pay us, you can go even further. And it's very reminiscent of what we do now, in certain,
In
I'm
my
not
sermon
gonna-
on Sunday, I talked about how we know it or don't know it, but that Christian churches are still designed with the temple divisions in mind. Have the 10% in the front, which is reserved for clergy. And you have this middle part, which is reserved for the initiated. And that part out there is supposed to be the place where people who are seekers, people who are inquiring. But Jesus' fury was that there was no room for the seekers. There was no room.
Right.
They had
right.
pushed all that out.
Exactly.
And I think we still have done that.
Yeah.
It's a good thing I'm not going through my ordination trials now. I would not make it. I would not make it. I would not be approved. I just,
Well, they haven't caught up, huh? I mean, maybe not Princeton, but some others, no?
there are certainly seminaries that are full of the effect of the two-thirds world, as Orlando Costas used to call it. The two-thirds world and the theology and the faith of two-thirds is actually having an impact now.
How about Union? They
Union
seem to
is
be-
fully versed. In
Yeah,
fact,
that's
if you
what
want to learn liberation theology, go to Union Seminary. I mean, for
I've gone to hear
for
people
feminist
speak there, and
theology,
it's
for
been
black liberation
enlightening.
theology, for even for gay and lesbian, reworking a whole theological understanding in light of what happens when you welcome people into the conversation that aren't just this little group of white males who are used to controlling the world. The problem I see, my grief is that the church as an institution is dying so fast in North America that there's almost nobody left to reform. There's like, they're dropping like flies, and the ones who aren't dropping are
The
the big.
evangelicals, how do we talk about?
Yeah.
I find myself very awful to evangelicals. I have sat in Bible studies for the last, how many years? Saying, but the evangelicals, and I'm always, I don't want to do that. That's not right. But how do you get around something that's so against what you believe?
I think that a little bit came in your comments last night to say, let's not get so myopic that we don't see all of what's happening. There are letting the talking heads tell us the way it is. I believe that there's a myth of the strength of the evangelicals, because you look at what's happening around here. So there's a very powerful evangelical church that is built on the side of the road down there on
Hawthorne Gospel?
Hawthorne Gospel.
Oh, yeah.
And people are like, wow, look how many people are there. And what I know is this: where are those people coming
They
from?
drive from far and wide.
And you know who they are? They're the offscouring of the churches that have died. Many of them are the people who were the disgruntled ones, who came in and fought the fights in the mainline churches, who fought all the reforms that were taking place, and they collect in a way that their numbers are impressive. But, like every statistician, you have to take a look. You can't just take the first look. You need to dig into who it is. And so then you read, like Christian Century used to be the flagship of evangelical Christianity. Now, its journalists are much more progressive, and they're telling the story of the demise of the evangelical church.
Of the evangelical.
The evangelical church. The attendance is down, the optimism is not there, because people embrace that with an idea that, here is Zion. This is going to be the city of God. This is going to be the place where everything will work. There'll be no divorce because we make it illegal. There'll be no abortions because everyone will follow along.
Well, that'll be illegal.
Yeah, you know, and women will,
Just make it all illegal.
yeah,
Women will be quiet
women will
in
stay
church.
women will
Stay
stay at
alive.
home and raise children, and will have no more problems with drugs and alcohol and all the rest.
Yeah, and they'll do homeschooling too.
Right, and they'll do homeschooling because the public school won't do it, so we'll show you how to do it ourselves.
We don't
And-
like what they're telling you to read in the public schools or to think so you stay home. But there's so many more people now, homeschooling
Oh,
is scary.
Yeah.
Because how do you know, first of all, if they're getting a proper education, but what indoctrination, I hate to think.
So what happens is, you sing the songs of the reconstruction of the old ideals, right? Here it is. God's bringing us back together, and then it doesn't work.
And it doesn't work out.
And then the senior pastor, he finds out, has been having affairs with 20 women in the congregation.
That seems to happen so often.
Oh my goodness, it's everywhere.
Is
And-
that just a power thing, though? If you give so much power to, a charismatic leader, you can expect that person to abuse the power?
Yeah, I think it's the power, but it's not, it's the unchecked power. It's the power that comes when people go like this.
Well,
They just,
actually, I also think that as negative as the institutions of the different denominations can be, I also think that it's very important that those institutions be there, because they are the ones that check that kind of power.
Yes.
This stuff doesn't go on so much in mainline churches.
no, you're right.
Because there is some balance.
Right, there is an accountability
Yeah.
built into it. But it's those systems that have the accountability that are dying.
Yeah, I know.
You know, the denomination, the Presbyterian PCUSA denomination is a mere shadow
Right.
of what it used to be. And it's, we can still manage to get together every other year, and manage to pull together something of a national identity. But, here, the merger of presbyteries, which used to be the tightest little accountability community, has all fallen away. So now we have 100 churches merged into what's a presbytery.
Used to be just the north.
Palisades used to
the
have
Presbytery,
42
the
churches.
Palisades. Yeah,
Now,
and you knew everybody in,
yeah, you did. And we would go have dinner together, and the accountability would happen because we knew each other.
Right.
The structures are gone.
Wow.
And I have said, all the way back since I was a pastor in Ewing, the end of the presbytery system came with the rise of the internet. Because we could leapfrog over all the boring meetings of the middle judicatories and
Synod
and also missions. And this unfortunately was the result of the strictures that the structure put on missions work. They would collect mission money, and they used to collect it in piles. But it was like the trickle-out theory. They would consume so much of it in the structure of the denomination, and by the time it went out to missions, so then congregations began to, through the internet, they began to learn about that, and they would go, why do we need them?
Right.
Let's just give the money. Let's just put the money into mission. And so this presbytery's mission budget, when I came into this presbytery, the mission budget was $300,000 a year. The last budget that I worked on, there was $20,000.
Wow.
And everybody goes, oh, nobody gives to mission. And every time they would say it,
That's why.
I would say, you're wrong. Go look at the record. Every congregation is
It's
supporting
doing
mission.
Right.
They're giving the money out, but they're not giving it to you.
Right. And that's that's the draw of most of the individual congregations is, oh, are you a mission-oriented church?
Yeah.
I'll go there. So they were foolish in not seeing that.
There's some things that we would do better if we did it together. I think
Yeah.
about the Immokalee
Absolutely.
workers. If we didn't have Barbara here going down there and translating it and bringing back to us, we would never be able really effectively as a congregation to engage. Because we need the Presbyterian Mission Agency. We need that agency to be having people on the ground, out there in the world, and then the old way was, come home for a year, tell your story of the mission work. But that's expensive. And so now it's direct. Everything is direct. And the one thing we can't do is the social witness and the justice advocating in Washington. Like, we cannot, or I guess we could, we cannot send someone from this congregation down to the senators and the congressmen.
Not
and-
effectively.
Not effectively, no.
Right.
But, boy, when the Presbyterian Church pools its resources together.
Exactly, then you have a voice.
Yeah, and the stated clerk of the national church sends a letter.
You might notice
Yeah,
that.
it adds a little bit, we hope.
Maybe, depending on
While we
what's
still
coming next.
exist. Now
Exactly.
you'll have people go, who's the
are
Presbyterian
they?"
Church? Who are they?
Well, you might have people in government now that don't care about any of these institutions. They're willing to jettison all of that,
Because
which
the
is
mission,
very frightening.
the mission which was underlying this celebration about the wedding, the mission has changed in the minds of many people. And now the mission is just survival of me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's how do I survive? And
Well,
I hope that's not gonna be the
I don't
case.
think it's everybody, not even at all, but it's powerful.
it is powerful and it's noisy.
Oh.
But I just have such a very different viewpoint because of my experiences in Uganda. It's so very, very different. The churches there are growing. And there's an excitement.
Mhm. Well,
So that's where our hope is.
that is where our hope
You know?
is.
And maybe we can learn from other countries.
Well,
They need
again,
to come back and,
again,
The mission has to be them to us,
It
not the other
does.
way around.
exactly. That was, again, Orlando Costas talked about a date. There was a date in history when the American mission, Christian missionary work was to go out. And then churches that we had planted, like one of the examples was in Korea, churches that were planted by Christian missionaries were now recruiting missionaries in Korea to come to the United States and to evangelize the place that evangelized them.
yeah.
And maybe that's still what has to continue to happen.
That would be a nice cooperative kind of a thing, sometimes.
Janet cannot get in the building.
Oh,
So let's say we're done, okay?
Yeah.
And then I'll turn off the machines. Thank you for coming today. Thanks for sharing this encouragement or understanding exercise.
Bye, Barbara.
Barbara,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Have a good week. Lots of food for thought today.
Take care.
Yes, yes. All right. And signing off to those of you who are listening and participating online. We'll be back next Wednesday with this and also next Tuesday night.
Take care.